Welcome back to the CyberVault. Today I'm thrilled to have Damian Schenkelman here with me today. Damian is the VP of R&D at Auth0. He was one of the earliest engineers behind Auth0 and very much now a key driver in cutting-edge identity research and development. Today we're going to be talking about something new that he's building, and I've got to say it's a very hot topic in the space. But Damian, thank you for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you on. Why don't you maybe kickstart and give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. As you said, my name is Damian, but everyone calls me Schenkel. I've been working at Auth0 for a bit more than 11 years now. I was lucky enough to work on the core product in the early days, build a lot of the engineering org, and in the past few years, I've been doing R&D, research of new products. And we're going to talk about, let's say, our latest hit during this conversation, I guess.
No, awesome. And it's definitely exciting to have you on. I think this is going to be, especially for a lot of our audience, something that's really going to pique their interest. And I suppose let's just kickstart. Let's build down and really get into it. Talk about what is it that you're building at the moment, and why is it that you're maybe bringing this new solution to the table?
Yeah, so we've been building this thing we call Auth for Gen AI. And the idea is we're seeing everyone use AI, right? Like everyone's trying to create AI agents, AI chatbots. We're seeing this a lot for internal applications. We're seeing this in consumer apps and B2B apps. But those apps need to be secure and identity, right? Authentication, authorization, those are part of security. We started noticing that a lot of the frameworks out there, a lot of the apps out there might not have been doing this, let's say, in the best way. And we were like, hey, like this is where we can help, right? Like we did this years ago for mobile apps and for web apps. AI apps are just another type of app. They are even just part of other apps. So we should be able to do what we did for mobile and for web, easy, simple, secure authentication for developers for AI apps, and that's what we're doing.
Awesome. No, and it's exactly as you say. I think kind of the adoption of not just AI, but specifically Gen AI, especially in security as well, is pretty big right now. And I think it's really interesting to dive into because you're not just building a new feature, really. You're kind of building out a new category. I mean, talk to me a little bit more about what this looks like.
Definitely. So the first thing we noticed was that AI application requirements from a security perspective, from an identity perspective, were not necessarily new, but the big change was the frequency with which certain characteristics, certain things started to happen. For example, we are starting to get used to the fact that you have a chatbot, you have an AI agent, and it has access to your data, right? It might access your emails or your calendar or your wiki, anything. That's not new, right? Like you could always go into an application and like try to kind of like configure how to log in with your other accounts and it would fetch data. But because of the nature of AI apps, because you can use natural language to communicate, it's much more natural and much more common to integrate data from all of these data sources.
Yeah.
That's why we said, hey, we need to make that easy. How do we make it easy to integrate with other apps securely so that you can have one app that integrates? Similar things happen with, hey, we're going to see a lot of these AI agents that maybe don't have a UI directly exposed to users, right? They might just be, I'm going to use quotes, like floating somewhere in the ether. And they still need to authenticate with users. They might need to do what's known as a human in the loop, checking with a user, hey, is this action okay with you? And they need to do that securely. So we invested in building a capability based on secure standard protocols to make that happen. And that's what we call async authorization. And then the other thing we noticed was a lot of these applications are retrieving context from different data sources, first party data sources. And to be honest, in many cases, enterprises were not, let's say, doing the best authorization, making
Mm.
sure that users had access to the right chunks, the right documents when they were retrieving them. Because before, when you were building apps, a lot of that authorization logic was on the kind of like the UI layer, on the interface, the app layer, if you think about a three-layer architecture. And now that's being replaced with the agent, the chatbot. That's the one that's coordinating and accessing everything. So you need to do authorization at a very fine-grained level for your APIs and for your data. Otherwise, when you do this kind of like retrieval augmented generation flows, you risk showcasing information that users shouldn't have access to.
Yeah. And I think kind of because what you're mentioning and what you're talking about here is super relevant. And I think kind of whether you just look at before even the adoption of Gen AI, it was always a pretty critical vulnerability, should we say, within businesses and their applications, especially I think kind of so many different kind of well CISOs or technology leaders ideally they want something that's holistic or can seamlessly integrate with other applications because otherwise again you're just creating more vulnerabilities for yourself. I mean, out of curiosity, what do you think maybe a common misconception is for CISOs and technology leaders at the moment, where maybe they're not kind of looking to adopt this kind of technology, or maybe they've not been focusing on it because they don't necessarily realize how significant or how important this is?
I think CISOs and CSOs are actually worried about these things. Where I don't see necessarily people paying enough attention might be the people building these apps. And
Yeah,
that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think what happens is a few things. The first one is with AI, you can build applications really fast, right? Like, but it's a demo app, like it's sort of a POC, and there's a lot of market pressure. I guess in many cases it can be pressure from the top to get these apps out there, and you might just not know the best way to do things, or you might just not be aware of the risks that you might incur in when you're building these Gen AI apps. So, like, not every developer, not every CTO knows the OWASP Gen AI top 10, and they don't need
yeah,
to, right? And that's the key. It's just things are moving so fast that, like, again, you didn't no one needed to know all of the OWASP top 10 before, but, like, again, over time libraries progress and they make things easier for everyone building with them. Now everyone's building Gen AI frameworks, everyone's building Gen AI apps, but we haven't had time to adjust to settle. And you need a few things to make sure that Gen AI apps are successful, right? You need security. That's, again, it's obvious, but like, you need it. And part of that is making sure that users are who they say they are, have the right access to things, that agents can integrate with apps in a secure way so that they don't have more access that they should. Another one, again, not related to security and identity, is what's known as evals, right? Again, and that's not new. You always tested your applications, you were observing their behavior in production, but now you need to be a lot more data driven, make sure, hey, I'm getting unexpected outputs for a given input, and that's a deviation because of the non-determinism of LLMs. But, like, those things are musts. And we're starting to see this in the industry, right? Like, I was actually the other day vibe coding a website. I think it's like aileaks.dev, and I'm starting to kind of like add news across the industry from like AI data leaks and hacks, because like these are
mm,
starting to happen. A lot of them are very, very much related to the stuff that we're doing around identity and security for Gen AI apps.
yeah, no, for sure. And I kind of like how you highlighted there that it obviously it is an important thing that clearly kind of technology leaders you see at least the conversations there and they're definitely aware of the importance. And I think it's always interesting kind of that cycle of innovation typically steers a little bit further ahead than the security side does because people are focusing on building the products rather than the security practice. And I think obviously that's where this also can really come into play. I suppose another thing that's really, really critical is the education piece. How when you're kind of bringing something like this to the table, how do you communicate and educate customers on, okay, this is what this product does, this is the importance. How do you make sure that that messaging comes across?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great question, because you don't want to go with the stick, right? You want to go with the carrot. So what we try to do, and this is what we've always done, is we're building a product that, like, developers and now moreover like application builders, because again more people are getting into building applications, can use. And it's all about enablers, right? So we're not saying, hey, like, don't get hacked while connecting to apps. We're saying connect to apps securely, right? We're not
Yeah,
saying, like, don't do RAG. We're saying, hey, this is how you do fine grain authorization for RAG. So it's about, first of all, conveying the use cases, right? And in many cases, for example, companies are coming to us and say, hey, we want to secure MCP servers. What should we do? Right. So
yeah,
we're working on a product for that, or at least feature for that, and an SDKs for that. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a new product or not. But the key thing is they are asking us not just for these capabilities, but also for our expertise. There are parts where we might not align completely with the current version of the MCP spec. We're working with the MCP folks to iterate on that, but at the same time, we give that guidance back to our customers and kind of like say, hey, go in that direction.
Yeah.
The other thing is we make it really easy to integrate with your existing apps and with production apps, right? Like that's the key. If integrating was a pain, first of all, again, that's not good in terms of like competitors, but also that's not the experience that we want to give our customers. And they still have to do it, right? Like as I was saying before, security is a thing that you have to do. You might miss it,
Yeah.
but once you know you have to do it, you do it. We don't want them grinding their teeth having to integrate. It should be kind of like a good, happy experience. That's one. But the other thing, and this is very important, is that developer experience translates into less security issues because what you're doing when you're integrating is less likely to go wrong if you got it right, and also
Yeah.
faster time to integration. And those two things are very important in enterprise use cases, not just developer use cases.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And again, I think kind of you mentioned a couple of key things there, but one of the things that I think I come across so often, especially from the tech side, is the adoption of complex technologies. It just puts people off. They, if that process is more effort, then kind of, people are like, well, I don't really want to do it. They don't necessarily always see, because I suppose the one of the biggest downsides to security is that you only really see the negative impact once it's happened. Like it's almost like that kind of thing that, oh, we'll be fine until then it actually happens to you kind of thing. And it's always that, oh, it'll never happen to us. It's just that thing you hear about in the news. It's definitely one of those situations. I mean, I suppose kind of, and this can sometimes be hard to predict, but when you're looking at kind of the evolution of whether it's agentic AI, or kind of the relation that it has to AI native systems, I mean, do you have any predictions, or any kind of foresight into, look, I think this is kind of what we're going to see over the next couple of months, or do you think there's going to be a significant increase in kind of where, or the demand for adopting these kind of solutions?
Yeah, well, I have some ideas. It's always very hard to
Very hard,
predict
yeah.
like the future, but I do have some ideas. I think first of all, I think we're going to start to see more adoption of these types of solutions. Um, Companies know or are starting to realize that these problems are out there, and they are aware that they need to solve them. And
Mm,
and that's going to just become our product. We're seeing more startups coming up with these solutions. We're seeing larger companies start to address this. And again, personally, I'm very excited because we kind of like moved here first, and we know kind of like we have a very strong vision for this. But ultimately, it's good for the industry as a whole to be more secure. So that's one. I
yeah.
think the other thing that I think will happen is I think we'll see more browser using agents than what we have.
Mm,
We saw an announcement from OpenAI operator, I think was earlier this year, and we haven't seen a lot there. Um, but there's like experimental projects from Google around this. There are a couple of startups that are kind of like up and coming and are starting to get used to this. And I don't think everyone's going to go migrate to an MCP server. I think we're going to see kind of like some websites partner with these web agents. Like maybe again, I don't know if it's going to be a revenue sharing model or pay per access model. That part for me is not clear. But I expect a lot of the existing internet is going to start kind of like being navigated by these
yeah.
agents. And then products that do decide to kind of like go either the MCP way or any other way to kind of like expose their existing or new APIs to customers, I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think people and like people in leadership positions are starting to realize, hey, like a lot of traffic is coming from ChatGPT and similar sources. The interaction patterns are different, and ultimately, most enterprises, if you think about enterprises, and many consumer sites, not all of them, again, that depends on the revenue model, they don't necessarily care about like getting your eyes on a site or an app or anything. They just want you using their platform and their product.
Mm,
They're going to kind of like try to securely lower that barrier of entry. So that, I think those are the trends that I expect. And then the other one, which I hear people talking about, and I think it's very early because I haven't even seen kind of like basic cases of this working. Again, all of the stuff that we're talking about. But I think the next thing is going to be kind of like agent delegation, where you're going to have not just one agent doing something, but a few
Yeah.
agents, and they're going to kind of like have to share access and restrict permissions to each other and delegate work to each other in a secure way. I, there are many people across the industry thinking about that. I think that's it's good to be thinking about problems, but it's much further ahead than where everyone is. I think
Yeah.
like we're at the point where like, okay, how do I get data securely into these agents, and how do I make them? How do I allow them to perform the right operations in my apps and on my data without kind
Mm.
of like getting into trouble?
Yeah, I mean that sounds unbelievable, but at the same time so complex. I mean, it might sound more simple to kind of R&D minded individuals such as yourself, but definitely a case that I think it's you can kind of see how the value would, well, having a product like that is, or I suppose kind of multiple different ways of working there is definitely going to be valuable. But I appreciate also then securing that is probably going to add an additional layer of complexity for sure. And I suppose then kind of it's an exciting time. There's obviously lots going on. I mean, are there any key kind of lessons or takeaways that you would say, look, if anybody's listening here and you're being able to kind of resonate with something that we've been saying, or there's just kind of maybe they want to dig a little bit deeper and find out a little bit more. I mean, is there any lessons or advice that you'd pass on to technical leaders that are trying to build in a fast moving space like this?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, Gen AI is happening, right? Either you're building to use it or you're building to enable it. That's one. Second of all, Gen AI, because of its non-determinism and because of some of these patterns that we mentioned, does introduce, I would say, vulnerabilities or security issues that might not have been that common before, and you need to address them. Um, and there's going to be an explosion in AI agents. Right? Like everyone's going to start using them. Users are going to use AI agents. AI agents. So, like again, you're going to see a lot more of these agents, what we call like non-human identities, and you need to make sure that those are protected. If this sounds interesting, like, hey, how do I get my application or my API or my system ready to be consumed securely by AI agents? That's one side of it, and the other one is how do I build secure AI agents? Like any of those, we'd be happy to chat. We have kind of like our site on like odzero.ai, so people can go check it out. They can reach out to me directly on social. I'm like at the Schenkelman on X slash or formerly known as Twitter, and my name on LinkedIn. So like they can find me. Again, happy to kind of like chat with folks on DM. We've been talking to a lot of customers and prospects from small startups that are AI native and need these capabilities and are looking to integrate to Fortune 100 companies that also need these capabilities. And one of the interesting things about this is those Fortune 100, Fortune 500 established companies are moving very fast
Yeah.
compared to other cycles. But they still need this capability, and that's kind of like one of the exciting things to build a new product that's going to have traction at so many levels.
Yeah, for sure. I think that is definitely an exciting thing because ultimately, often a product is either tailored to enterprises or early stage startups or the SME or whatever it may be. But the reality is here, actually, it's going to be applicable to pretty much everybody, especially as the adoption of Gen AI agents is really kind of becoming more widespread. And obviously, we'll tag you in this when kind of it's posted and everything, so people can easily reach you. I mean, is there anything in particular that people can follow? Is there anywhere kind of, do you have like newsletters or anything like that where people can kind of track and see a little bit more information about what's going on here? Because I imagine there'll probably be quite a few people listening in thinking this is pretty awesome, and I definitely want to hear more.
So again, it depends on the audience. If you're already a customer, either Okta customer or Auth0 customer, you should talk to your account manager. Um, we're sharing a bunch of things at a few upcoming Okta company events, so like people should register to those. And then we share some updates around this on social. So like the Auth0 community channels, I shared a bunch of the stuff that we're working also as well on social, so like people can stay tuned there.
Awesome. No, I mean, if you didn't just already give people a good reason to be a customer, there's another one. You get all the extra content and stuff as well, which is great. Awesome. Well, Damien, honestly, thank you so much for hopping on here with me today. This has genuinely been a really insightful and packed episode. The innovation that you're driving, and I suppose kind of ultimately just working on such a such an impactful product is. It's just really great to be able to deep dive into that and hear a little bit more. It's a perspective that people don't always get to hear, I suppose. So no, that's been really great. And obviously, to all of our listeners, don't forget to subscribe. Make sure to share this episode with your security peers. Get connected with us on LinkedIn. Get connected with Damien and the team on LinkedIn. But that's it for today. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time for more conversations shaping cyber.